Hello summoners, welcome back to another Pro Guides video. My name is Nathaning, and today we'll be talking about our predictions for the 15 most broken champions on patch 11.19. One of the most important things in a constantly evolving game like League of Legends is to be able to adapt with the meta. And that's why we're here for you. If you want to know what's going to be OP before the patch hits, you'll be ready to hit the ground running without having to test if one buff or nerf really made that much of a difference. And if you don't know how to play any of these OP picks, or you're just a little bit rusty, this will give you a few days to brush up on them in normals or on a smurf. And before we get started, I just want to say that this list is not in any particular order. It's just a list of champions that we think are going to be some of the strongest, most influential picks this patch. As a small preface to these entries, I do want to note that this is the world's patch, and Riot has been pretty clear that the changes are aimed at pro play. So despite the change list having a lot of champions on it, not much is changing for what's OP in solo queue. We'll be starting off things with TALON. TALON has been a problem champion in the mid lane for quite a while, and while Riot did throw out a nerf on him at patch 11.18, it was a pretty minor change that didn't really address any of the things that really made him OP. He still has one of, if not the best level 2 all-ins in the game, and his roaming is incredibly impressive. If TALON is against an opponent that ever respects him mid, then he can simply use the free lane to roam, parkouring his way to the side lane or even going for invades on the enemy jungler to pick off a free double buff. And then there's the fact that he's also one of the assassins that can be very comfortably going for a bruiser build with Conqueror. So he's just as beefy as any other bruiser while still retaining his ability to one-shot squishy targets. He's just a very snowbally yet consistent champion with little to no risk at the moment, which all adds up to a pretty unhealthy champion. Whether you're trying to learn how to abuse the broken champions on this list or end up on the wrong side of the matchup, if you really want to speed up the process, you should check out ProGuides.com. We have courses from all your favorite streamers and pros like CoreJJ, Aframu, and XSmithy to help you really understand how to play your role. And if you want a more personalized experience, we have coaches available 24/7 to really help you become the best. Our coaches are top-tier players that have spent years climbing the solo queue ladder to get where they are now, and they're ready to share everything that they've learned with you. So stop spinning the wheels on your own and get on the fast track to higher elo today. Now let's get back on topic, shall we? Our second pick is KENNEN. While he does show up on the nerf list for this patch, don't go thinking that he's gutted all of a sudden. The nerf is pretty small. It's 10 base damage and 5% AP ratio gone from his Q. That may reduce KENNEN's damage a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really change how insanely strong he's become as a mid laner. His kit is just too perfect at countering the champions that dominate the mid lane meta at the very moment. Being ranged means that you can easily bully melee champions. Usually assassins would combat that playstyle by going for an all-in, but that doesn't work too well against KENNEN. You just stun them with a quick combo and zip back to the tower, and they're left with no cooldowns as they resume the poke. Then post 6, things get just a little bit worse for them, since KENNEN's ultimate is a perfect answer to anybody trying to take a fight. The combination of an instant stun and a ton of damage means that you'll send just about anybody back to the fountain. If super strong laning wasn't enough, KENNEN's ultimate also makes him one of the best 5v5 champions in the league. Sometimes it just takes a single flash R to turn the game around, and if you're already ahead, close one out. Now let's talk a little bit about ZHAO. Back on patch 11.16, Riot knocked a relatively hefty 3 AD off of ZHAO. We thought this would be at least knocking him down a tier or two, but not only is he still an S tier champion, but he's still straight up the #1 performing jungler in the game. He's just way too good of a duelist, and his early game ganks were way too strong. Probably the biggest factor for his success were the changes earlier in the season that made it so that he can just dash on you from halfway across the screen. Then there's the bruiser build with Gore Drinker at its core, and it gives him pretty good scaling for teamfights so he doesn't just fall off in the same way that he used to. If we really want to see him knock down a peg, then we're gonna really have to see some serious nerfs, like reverting his W applying his passive or reducing his enhanced dash range. Next up, we have KAYN. Aside from being a really strong champion in the jungle, another thing that makes KAYN such a dangerous champion to go up against is how insanely easy he is. I don't like using the phrase elo inflated very often, but KAYN is a champion that can easily go into that category. The classic red for bruiser and blue for assassin builds are very much alive, but the most absurdly OP part about KAYN is the purple build. This is where you go Shadow Assassin but build Gore Drinker like with the red form. The result is pretty much the same as with TALON. You can easily assassinate squishies in an instant, but at the same time, you have all this extra beefiness for the teamfights. In case you can't tell already, Gore Drinker is kind of a problem item. Sona may be getting nerfed, but at the end of the day, pretty much nothing is changing. I mean, look at what they're actually doing. Not being able to queue targets out of vision will very rarely make or break trades in the bot lane, and losing 2 armor will pretty much never be felt. I promise, if you ever get hooked by Blitz or engaged on by Leona, that 2 armor isn't gonna save you. You can either play well and live, or get caught and die. The one change that could definitely make a difference is the 1 to her E. Sona was able to slow champions like Olaf and Yi even when they were supposed to be slow immune. While that is a pretty game-breaking bug when that interaction is happening, those champions aren't exactly the most prevalent in the meta, And you aren't picking Sona just for that reason. She's still gonna have insanely strong teamfighting scaling, providing tons of damage and sustain to allies in extended fights. Rek'Sai is our next pick. While she may be overshadowed in terms of popularity by ZHAO, Rek'Sai pretty much does the exact same job just as well. In fact, you could say she's an even more dangerous champion to play against. And that's because Rek'Sai can gank any lane from any angle thanks to her tunnels. When you quite literally tunnel in on an enemy, nobody could really escape her. No one can ward every angle for their lane, and with Rek'Sai being able to gank somebody that just takes a few steps out of the tower range, the result is very often a very hard snowball within just a few minutes of the game's start. The one downside Rek'Sai has is her scaling isn't that great, especially if the game reaches the point where both teams are grouped up and only fight 5v5s. But most of the time, Rek'Sai gets so fed early that the game is shut out before that's even a possibility. Another OP pick that we have in the jungle is Fiddlesticks. No matter what the meta has been in the jungle, he's been sitting in the OP tier the entire season. That's because his ultimate is just so insanely strong for teamfighting that it just doesn't even meta. Plenty of champions have scaling, but nobody else has the potential of completely wiping out an entire team like him. You may argue that things like AP Malphite or Annie exist, but they don't even begin to compare. First, Fiddlesticks' ultimate has a way bigger AoE than other champions, especially those two chumps. Second, his ultimate is also a blink with a pretty long range, so you can use it to gank or join fights over any wall in the game. He's going to continue to be a problem champion until they either triple his ultimate's cooldown or gut his damage to the point where he can't kill anybody. But even then, tank Fiddlesticks would probably just become OP or something. Now we have KATARINA. There are quite a few things that make KATARINA OP, the first of which is her surprisingly strong all-in abilities. Stepping near one of her daggers pretty much always results in a bad trade or even straight up dying, even as early as level 2. It kinda sucks when you can play the lane perfectly for several minutes, then lose off a single misplay. Sometimes it's not even your fault. KATARINA's roaming is also notoriously amazing. She may not have hard CC, but the Shumpo resets on the dagger makes it easy to stick to opponents. So if her roam isn't respected, she often very picks up a kill or two. Then to top things off, there's also her flexibility. And I'm not talking about in the cinematic, if you guys know which one I'm referring to. I'm talking about her build path. Pure AP, Glass Cannon is generally the go-to, but KATARINA can also easily flex to AD, bruiserish builds with items like Sunderer, Blade of the Ruined King, and Titanic Hydra. This build makes her super tanky while also providing plenty of damage. You guys can tell there's a reoccurring theme here, tanky assassins. Right, we need to do something about this. Out of everybody on this list, she may be my #1 recommendation for banning in solo queue. Like we predicted last patch, the micro nerf of increasing Camille's cooldown on the passive by 4 seconds did absolutely nothing to change how OP she is. When played well, she still wins almost all matchups in both the top and mid lane. That little extra window of time doesn't magically just give you a way of punishing her. If you run at Camille, she just simply uses the W to damage you, slowing you in the process. But Camille's laning isn't exactly what makes her so dangerous. The most disgusting part about her is the stupidly high damage that she gets on her Q. There's nothing like 1k true damage every 5 seconds. And speaking of true damage, we have our next pick, Vayne. She's held down the spot of the #1 ADC for quite a few patches in a row, and Riot seems to have no intention of knocking her down for now. While she does take some very good mechanics to be played well, when you have to deal with the very good Vayne, she's very difficult to shut down when she gets going. Out of all the other hyper carries, she's by far the hardest to punish. Not only does she have a lot of mobility on her low cooldown tumble, but she also has self-peel with her E, and when her ultimate is available, her stealth can make it nearly impossible to pin her down, even with point-and-click abilities. And she doesn't give up anything in the way of DPS for all that safety. In fact, her true damage makes her the absolute best ADC for shredding through beefy frontlines. Like Vayne, Riven is another champion that takes some pretty good mechanics to get the most out of her kit. In fact, I would say that she's way harder than Vayne or any other champion on this list. But when you queue into somebody that's truly a master of Riven, it feels like there's just no right move that you can make. The best Rivens can turn even the worst matchups into skill matchups, and if you don't know how exactly to beat her, a single mistake will eventually lead to your death. And once Riven gets a lead, the game becomes a very difficult uphill battle. Her trading is oppressive, since she can go ahead and commit super hard with her mobility, or use it to go for small bursty trades, hopping out before you can even trade back. Then once you're low, she can go for an all-in with her ultimate. In teamfights, her mobility makes her hard to escape, and thanks to her shields and atomization, bursting her down can feel next to impossible. In a side lane, she can just burst down most champions that try to match her. In fact, she can probably just dive you from full HP if she's strong enough. The only real way of stopping her from taking over the game is just shutting her down early, but like I said, good players usually won't let that happen. In the worst case scenario, they'll just play safe and farm up until they can outscale you. The only reason Riven's win rate isn't much higher is because of how hard she is to play. I often think about putting in the time to learn her. I used to play her super well, but I'm kinda washed up now. But then I think, is it really that worth it? It would take hundreds and hundreds of hours to even come close to being as good as the best Rivens out there. I wish I could just wake up and learn how to play her like that. And that brings us to today's question of the day. If you could somehow skip the training and just be the best in the world at one champion, who would it be? Let us know in the comments down below. Now without further ado, on with the video. Our next pick is ZHAO. He's always been a very popular champion, maybe even too popular in my opinion. I think we all know that some people have no business playing this champion. But lately, he's not just a popular pick, he's a really good one, with his performance in the mid lane being right up there with TALON and KATARINA. When you consider how vulnerable his early game is, that's pretty impressive. If you can survive the first 10 minutes or so or 10 deaths as ZHAO, you're in a really good spot. You spike really hard, really fast, even without needing a full item. Just Berserker's Greaves and Zeal is usually enough to start winning trades on your opponent. Then once you reach the bigger spikes like Shield Bow and Infinity Edge, if the map hasn't completely fallen apart yet, you can go ahead and carry the fights pretty hard and take over the game. While mid lane is definitely the much more popular spot for ZHAO players, ZHAO bot lane is definitely super strong as well. In fact, I might even say that he's even better. There's no real bad matchups, and he synergizes well with scaling supports and kill lanes. Another OP pick in the bot lane is DRAVEN, and I can't really say that this is a surprise. DRAVEN was already a top 3 marksman for his last patch, and with him getting a buff, he's just that much stronger. The thing is, his damage is just way too high, even in the early game, so he just wins about almost any 2v2 lane where the support isn't completely useless. And once you get a lead on this monster of a champion, this is where the game is in your hands. His ultra high damage allows you to cut down anything in front of you, and since his build naturally has lifesteal, you can easily heal through the damage that would kill most other ADCs. He may not be quite as safe of a pick as the other popular ADCs, but he definitely turns up the carry factor all the way up to max. Up next, we have somebody that's grabbing our attention, and it's Blitzcrank. In the current support meta, most champions you see being played are pretty squishy. Sona, Yuumi, Soraka, Nami, even Thresh. All of them are free kills if you land a hook in the lane and you have a decently strong ADC. This naturally makes Blitzcrank a very dangerous pick right now. Usually, once you get one kill, any hook that you land after is another one. This leads to very volatile yet snowbally lanes, and I've gotta say, it's the only time where I'm comfortable with my support being a bot. All that pressure may lead to opponents sitting behind towers to avoid hooks, but that doesn't mean that you're neutralized. If that happens, you just go for a roam. There's nothing more tilting for a mid laner than having their lane decided by support gap. But early lane isn't even the most dangerous part about Blitzcrank. That would definitely be his insanely OP catch potential out of lane. Just a single well-timed hook can net your team a kill that results in a free dragon, baron, inhib, or even the whole game. Finishing off our list, we have Kha'Zix. Like more than half of the other champions on this list, he's just another unhealthy solo queue champion that Riot has refused to nerf, despite him having a high win rate, pick rate, and ban rate. The main issue with Kha'Zix is that he doesn't just fall into the typical feast or famine, high risk, high reward that comes with other assassins. He's a very consistent pick and is able to find his footing in just about every single game. So, with little to no risk of ever falling into the famine part of the equation, you're left with an assassin that basically always does either good or snowballs wildly out of control. And that about wraps things up for our predictions for the 15 most broken champions on patch 11.19. Hope you guys enjoyed the video because it definitely killed my voice. If you guys did, be sure to sub so you never miss out on any of our content like this. Remember, let us know what champion that you wish you could suddenly master down in the comments below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below where you can discuss League further or just hang out and be a part of the community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.